All right, how's it going out there, folks? Welcome back here to a Sunday night. It is the Earthmaster out here, about 10:08 p.m. here, California time, August 18th, 2024. We got Monday upon us tomorrow, so start of the new work week. Latest activity here on the globe shows a 2.5 across the Mediterranean area, and also a little small microquake here, 1.0. Into California. I want to start off here with Australia first, where we're noticing a little unusual earthquake sequence going on here across southwestern Australia near Perth, out in the Darling Range. Hello, Darling. A little bit of earthquake activity going on out there. USGS reporting a 4.6 and a 4.4, but as you can see, this area has been littered with a little bit of elevated earthquake activity out here in the last couple weeks, more so in the last 24 hours. There's a 4.6 out there, Western Australia, along with a couple other smaller quakes out here, 4s and some 3s and 2s out here. So a little question going across many folks' mind out here is where is this leading to? Are we leading to a bigger earthquake out here? That's a good question. So let's see what we got out here as far as historical data goes across the Darling Range out here. So we can see some big earthquakes out here, no doubt. Australia is a ways away from any major plate boundary. If you look out here across the area of the USGS map, these earthquakes are quite rare in terms of larger scale movement. And historical earthquake activity tells us that there has been a 6.5 earthquake out here in the Darling Range. Hopefully I got that correct. I can't see any other wording aside from my darling. Hello, my darling. Darling Range out here, southwestern Australia. 1968 for a 6.5 earthquake. Outside of Perth there. So obviously we can get some bigger earthquakes. 6.1 back in 1979. A couple years later, north here, a little sequence of earthquakes following that 6.1. So, while we're getting a couple 4s out here, it's a good reminder to be prepared for maybe some larger earthquake activity out here in the region. Definitely looks like we may be heading towards that direction, right? Elevated activity out there in southwestern Australia. All right, switching over here to California. That's a few thousand miles away. A couple earthquakes here. A couple earthquakes against the San Andreas Fault, 2.0 near Beaumont, California. That earthquake coming in just off the San Andreas Fault there near Ontario. And we did see a little bit of increasing earthquake activity out here outside of Bakersfield. Quite a few 2s stirring up there. A couple of those, 2.5. We had 3 earthquakes there above 2.5. In fact, 2.5 is the measurement out there over the last 24 hours there outside of Bakersfield. So things are still continuing out there in Southern California. This earthquake activity gives us a total tally of, about 660. Well, that's pretty close to 666. 667 earthquakes there outside of Bakersfield, California in the last 30 days. So we'll continue to keep an eye on that, right? And it's not only this region that's seeing elevated earthquake activity. We're watching this area around the Ridgecrest, a couple areas around the Puente Hills Thrust Fault, and more noticeable down south here across the San Jacinto Fault Zone, where we're seeing a little bit of elevated activity here tonight. A couple earthquakes out there in the red circles. So, best thing to do is be prepared, right? Little bit of newer activity outside of the Lake Isabella area, 1.4, and a couple other smaller quakes here in the last 24 hours. So overall, still watching this area. You can pretty much draw a triangle or so, or a little arrow north here, southward. That has seen some elevated activity, and it's funny because the shape that it makes out there is the equivalent of the Garlock Fault shear zone and the San Andreas Fault. Look at that. Notice that shear zone right here stretching south or west to east, and the plate boundary here north to south or northwest to southeast. That's where we're seeing that elevated activity. And of course, that puts this area in a major hazard area. So we'll continue to watch that for some larger scale movement. I don't think we're done with that. I honestly don't think that we've seen any relief out here recently. Maybe a little bit with the recent activity as far as the larger scale movement goes, but eventually everything will fill in and the strain will accumulate back out here. So we'll continue to keep an eye there on the Southern California areas. That's limited. It seems like most of the movement here has been confined right here, just north of the Garlock Fault Shear Zone southward. Very minimal activity north of that area. So aside from the Clear Lake volcanic field, but I don't like to include this in earthquake activity because even though this is earthquake magnitudes, this area is littered with these hydrothermal operations out here, and there's a whole process involved in these facilities that utilize the heated areas below, and there's numerous facilities that produce energy by injecting, check this out, raw sewage from the Bay Area down below to produce energy. Goodness. Think I'm joking? Look it up. All right, backing out of here. Cascadia subduction zone, pretty quiet. Like I say, it's a little odd. The brunt of the activity is confined here to the spring zone. I call it the spring zone because we've got this Garlock Fault Shear Zone that is a little odd, right, in terms of plate boundary movement out here. Most of the activity is parallel with the plate boundary, but this Garlock Fault Shear Zone is it's a big player, and it's lengthy, and I believe this area can produce a major earthquake out here. And that could probably trigger the San Andreas Fault down here, the southern branch. So this area showing a little bit more elevated activity than I care to mention. And you can see it. Can pretty much draw a line from here to there, down south here recently. And that includes areas around Los Angeles. So keep an eye there on that region of Southern California. Let's check out the tremor map here. Oh man, we are still elevated out here. 688 epicenters of tremor across the Cascadia, mostly across Washington there, northwestern Washington area. So yeah, I mean basically over the last week here, let's check out what we got. We've seen enhanced areas out here across the Cascadia. 3,404 epicenters of tremor. It looks like it's mostly confined here underneath this area of Washington. That is stress building up across the towards the north central area of the Cascadia subduction zone. So yeah, we'll continue to watch that, right? Obviously, Cascadia is an area that's overdue. Well, I don't know if it's overdue, but it's been 324 years since we've seen a major rupture out here across the Cascadia. So the question is, what's average? What is average out here? Roughly between 200 and 500 years. So it could pop off at any time. Further out and about here across the states, pretty quiet, aside from the oil fields getting hit. Puerto Rico area, a handful of earthquakes across the Puerto Rico Trench. Let's see what else we got here across the area. Nothing major going on across Hawaii. I'm going to skip that for now because we haven't seen any major advancement in terms of the uptick in inflation out there. New Zealand seen a 4.2 earthquake earlier today, right across the plate boundary. A couple other threes in there as well. It's a given here. Eventually, New Zealand will see some larger quake activity. It sits along a major plate boundary that's very capable of producing a upper 8 magnitude out here across the Hikurangi subduction zone, and an upper 7 here across the Alpine Fault further down the line. So, there's activity all around New Zealand. It's a guessing game when the next big one's going to take place here. But we look at this earthquake activity in Australia. That's some intraplate earthquakes going on there, and it's a swarm of activity, so that could be a sign here of a major adjustment going on there across the area of Australia. And that includes areas around New Zealand as well. So we got to pay attention to what's happening out here with all these 4s and 3s and 2s in southwestern Australia. How often do you see that take place out here? Not very often, so it's quite rare. So we'll keep an eye on the overall strain going on out here across the area. That includes New Zealand. Further up north here, got a little bit of swarming area around Philippines. We did see a 5.7 earthquake outside of Manila, well southeast there of Manila, about 23 miles into the subduction zone of the Philippine Trench. Close to a 6-pointer, right? But luckily this was a ways away from any populated areas, but it does show a sign here of increasing movement and strain out here against the Filipino plate. Chile area looks like seeing a 5.2 down here. Well south here along the Peru-Chile Trench. About 4 miles deep here into the subduction zone. That's actually a pretty shallow earthquake for a 5.2. This area here of Chile, that region right there, seeing the largest earthquake activity ever recorded in the history of mankind, at least recorded history, with that 9.5 back in the early 60s. So this region can see some big-time earthquakes, the largest known to man here along this area southwest here of Santiago, Chile, where a 5.2 struck. The Atlantic Ocean, pretty quiet. Let's go give a little gander out here across the Iceland area where things are stirring up out here. Got a little bit of earthquake activity here across the Grindavik area, and more noticeably south here of the Svartsengi area and the Reykjanes Peninsula. A little swarming out there across the Atlantic. Nothing major here across the area of Grindavik for now. Let me show the all magnitudes here. So this includes all the very small microquakes where the overall region out here is stressed. Right, we got over 20 million cubic meters of magma that has been accumulated underneath this area recently. So what happens when you accumulate all that stress and strain? Well, you get an eruption out here. So the question is, where is it going to happen? So we got to watch this earthquake activity. That's going to be the key lending indicator of where the strain and potential eruptions going to take place. So we got areas north here and south across the Svartsengi area. Solar weather activity. I was going to say earthquake activity on the sun. Well, I'm sure it's got its own earthquake activity, but space weather activity here, very quiet for now. We got a little bit of sea flare activity popping up here right now, but overall, things have been quiet over the last couple days. We do have numerous sunspots out here that need to be watched, but really nothing major going on. Not a whole lot of roars in the forecast. Fairly quiet across the board. All right, I'm going to call it a night, folks. Seismograph stations out there look pretty quiet. Not a whole lot going on out there. We do have some, various areas of earthquake activity that we need to watch. Increasing strain out here in the inner plate region of southwestern Australia, where they've seen a 6.5 earthquake quite a few decades ago. That could be pointing towards some larger quake activity out there around Western Australia. But keep an eye on the general pattern out here across New Zealand area as well. California, Southern California more specifically, has been somewhat elevated today as well. Need to keep an eye on it, right? Even though it's kind of died off somewhat, we need to watch this area of Southern California. A little bit of uptick here at the same time across various regions of interest here recently. And you can pretty much draw a line here across this area of Southern California that needs to be watched. That includes I mean, the Garlock Fault shear zone pretty much explains it all. We got an arrow pointing off here to the San Andreas southward. So keep an eye on this region, folks. We'll catch you guys back out here in the morning for the, oh man, is it work week? Monday morning work week schedule is upon us. We'll catch you guys back out here then. Stay safe. Have a good day. Or have a good evening. Peace out.